So today's reading is from Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. A European gentleman began in measured tones and spoke clearly and slowly. Why should individuals remain caught up in the affairs of this world and reap troubles as a result? Should they not be free? If they are in the spiritual world, they will have greater freedom. The Maharshi responded, the world is only spiritual. Since you are identifying yourself with the physical body, you speak of this world as being physical and the other world as spiritual, whereas that which is only spiritual. Devotee asked, do the disembodied souls, in other words, the spirits, have a deeper insight and enjoy greater freedom? The Maharshi said, because you identify yourself with this body, you speak of the disembodied souls as being spirits. From these limitations, you talk of their limitations and seek to know of their capacities. But even the disembodied souls have subtle bodies. Otherwise, you could not say disembodied souls. Disembodied souls means divested of this gross body. Inasmuch as you endow them with individuality, they are centered in their subtle bodies. Their limitations will be according to their own state. Just as you feel the burden of your limitations, they will also feel the burden of their limitations. What I mean by spirit and spiritual world is the absolute spirit and not the relative of which you speak. If you realize yourself as spirit, you will see that this world is only spiritual, not physical. Devotee asked, are their bodies temporary as our bodies are? Do they reincarnate? The Maharshi says, these questions arise because you think of yourself as the body. This body has birth and death, and when this body falls, another body arises, which is called reincarnation. But are you the body? If you find that you are not this body, but the spirit, you will be free from gross or subtle bodies, and then there are no limitations. Where is the world, physical or spiritual, in the absence of any limitation? How will the question of reincarnation arise? Again, consider it from another point of view. You create a dream body for yourself in the dream, and then act with that dream body. The same is falsified in the waking state. At present, you think that you are this body, and not the dream body, being awake. In your dream, this body, the waking body, is falsified by the dream body, so that you see neither of these bodies is real, because each of them is true for a time and false at the other time. That which is real must be real forever. But you say I. This I consciousness is present all through the three states of waking, dreaming, and sleeping. There is no change in it. That alone is real. The three states are false. They are only for the mind. It is the mind which obstructs your vision of your true nature as spirit. Your true nature is that of infinite spirit. That was the case in your sleep. You note the limitations in the other two states. What is the difference due to? There is no mind in deep sleep. but it exists in the dream and in the waking state. The feeling of limitation is the work of the mind. What is mind? Find it. If you search for it, it will vanish by itself, for it has no real existence. It is comprised of thoughts. It disappears with the cessation of thoughts. The devotee then asked, "Do I remain then?" The Maharshi said, "What is your experience in sleep? There are no thoughts, no mind, and yet you remained then." Devotee further asks, "When I try to meditate, I'm unable to do so because my mind wanders. So what should I do?" The Maharshi says, "Your question furnishes the answer. First, with regard to the first part of the question, you say you concentrate, but you do not succeed. You means the self. On what do you concentrate? Where do you fail? Are there two selves? For the one self to concentrate on the other? Which is the self now, complaining of this failure? There cannot be two selves. There is only one self. That need not concentrate." You ask, "But then why is there no happiness? What is it that prevents you from remaining as the spirit which you are in sleep? You yourself admit that it is the wandering mind. Find out what the mind is. If its wandering stops, it will be found to be the self. I consciousness, which is spirit eternal. It is beyond knowledge and ignorance." Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So welcome. So in this reading, the Maharshi is actually talking about and trying to get us to realize, understand, and know through the question from this devotee that's in the hall, that this is the practice we have to take up on our own. He's trying to show him this is the way that you disidentify with the mind and disidentify with the body. And that every imagination you can have about your body, about another's body, about subtle body, about reincarnated body, unreincarnated body, dream state, waking state, all of these ideas are the field in which we work. But the answer to how we progress in this is that we just keep dropping it all. And so he just keeps undermining every time the question gets a little bit more subtle, he just undermines it a little bit more. And then he finally says, "You are infinite spirit." And some of you know I ask you to take this stance a lot, just to have your experience and know what's happening in your experience, but actually to know that you're not the experience, whatever it is, whether the experience is in the mind, in the body, in the world, whatever's going on for you, in your thoughts, emotions, Just to keep coming back to this place where you know that what's on the screen of awareness, which is pure and pristine, you are not. Any object that comes onto the screen of awareness is not you. How do you know it isn't you? Because it doesn't remain. Even your most difficult problems, your most thorny issues, you take a break from them. Eventually they go away on their own. And for some, issues are very thorny, right? They can last for days or weeks or months, and it feels like you're just never going to find your way out of this difficulty that you're in. And but what's happening is you've forgotten that when nighttime comes and you look at the clock and it's 10 o'clock, you're going to go, oh gosh, I'm just going to go to bed. And you just free yourself from whatever the trouble was. And it disappears like that as soon as you fall asleep. Now it is true that sometimes your mind is still going strong, you have difficulty falling asleep. But what I'm trying to point out is that you will eventually just drop whatever you think the problem is, or whatever the problem may actually be in that moment, right? You'll just exhaust the body through this momentum of the mind, and eventually you'll just joyfully put it down and fall into deep sleep. So one of the things that can be said about the inquiry and our practice is that we have to become very good at falling asleep while we're awake, as far as the mind is concerned. So this is just another way of saying we get very good at not clinging in the present moment, in the waking state. We just keep putting it down, as though we were falling into deep sleep at night and we've just already exhausted ourselves and we can't go any further. And most of us during the day in the waking state, don't we, if we're really chewing on something, we can exhaust ourselves relatively quickly with the mind and the emotions, but we still don't drop it. We wait until we're so exhausted that we are just forced by the body into unconsciousness, into the deep sleep state. So in a way, we can simplify our practice if we realize that we can develop this ability to just let go in any given moment and cling to nothing at all, which has the smell of I, me, or mine. So if we're engaged with some object or with some activity or with something in the world, we can feel ourselves slowly or quickly get sucked right into the position of me, of mine. This is mine, I want it, I want to keep it. This is mine, I don't like it, I want to get rid of it. We can watch this tug that goes in the mind back and forth between the things we love and we want to cling to and the things that we hate and we want to get rid of. But of course, if we don't like something, or we have a strong emotion to get rid of something, we have already grasped it, right? It's not as pleasant as saying, oh, I like this, and I think I'll just hold on to this person, place, or thing for a period of time. I'll try to keep this as long as possible. And of course, eventually we begin to suffer because we're clinging to keep that pleasant feeling there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know this. So this clinging actually has to come before we even have the desire to push something away. So even when we're having a negative emotion, say, I don't want that negative emotion. I don't want that keep coming up. Why does this keep coming up? Or this dialogue with ourselves. We don't notice that what we're doing is clinging to the thought, and that's why it's become difficult. It's become thorny, sticky. Now we can't get rid of it, it seems. But what we can do is go back toward this deep sleep state. So each of you knows exactly what it feels like to go lay down on your couch, on the floor, on your futon, on the bed, and you have that few minutes where you just realize that there's such a great relief that you're letting yourself sink into pristine awareness, into consciousness which isn't troubled by mind, right? And as the Maharishi says, the mind is present only in the dream state and the waking state. So we rush toward that state where the mind isn't present. So can you do that during the day? Through this recognition of not clinging to anything which is mine, anything which has the smell of me to it. Well, it may not seem like it now. Some of you I know can because you've been doing this a while. But for those of you who feel like you can't do that, I will encourage you just by saying it just takes time. Right? The mind is a habitual animal, a creature, right? It likes habit. So if your habit is to chew on things and really grasp and cling to what is mine, whether it's a thought, an idea, a person, a belief about who you are, maybe, from the past, whatever it is you like to cling to, this is something you reinforce by saying, yes, yes, I've always been this way. It'll never change. I'm always the same. I can't get rid of this habit. It won't go away. When the simple way to get rid of it is not to have that dialogue going on in your mind all the time. And when you have that dialogue on your mind, in your mind, as many times as it comes up, drop it. Say, I'm going to go back to sleep right now. As though you were just settling in on your bed and pulling your comforter up to your chin. You can do this as you walk around, as you're in the world. Right? It's not going to isolate you from others. It's just going to give you some comfort when you're being troubled by your own mind. This recollection that, oh yeah, I can just drop this. Don't need to cling to this because this is a passing phenomenon anyway. Yes? Even if I try to hold on to my difficulty with a vengeance, and I'm going to hold on to it forever as a way of defining myself, mind becomes exhausted. So, assist it. Assist it by not clinging. Sometimes people say, well, if I don't do this, then there's just going to be nothing here. Which can be true, right? But those of you who've had the experience of the mind which empties out and there's nothing here, and then panic and fear comes immediately after that. Try to remind yourself in those moments that there seems to be nothing which is there. That this no thing which you are aware of is your nature, that you are no thing. In that moment you can see your nature as no thing, as nothing which the mind can identify with. Right? It's not that you are nothing and you are obliterating who you are and now, you're going to disappear into nothing. This is the true meaning of emptiness, both in Vedanta and in Zen. It's not emptiness that is void of the recognition that you are aware. It's emptiness of objects. It's emptiness of a sense of I, me, or mine. This is the emptiness that's being spoken about. So when you come to this place of emptiness and this place of nothingness, the Buddha described the states of nothingness and even encouraged people sometimes to investigate this state of nothingness. And the reason we're encouraged to investigate it is because when we investigate the state of nothingness, it's just like investigating the mind, as the Maharshi is talking about, and finding out that the mind is not a separate entity. It doesn't exist on its own. We look at the thoughts that go through the mind and we say, oh, that's mind. We label the group of thoughts throughout the day. We say, oh, well, that's mind. But no, if we look, there is no mind. There may be individual thoughts, but there's nothing we can point to and say, that's mine. Right? That's mind. Just like we can't look at anything with any way that we describe ourselves and say, that's who I am. If we look for something called mind, we say, oh, well, that thought, that must be mind. Well, no, that's a thought. And we can notice that there's another thought that comes after that one, and another thought that comes after that one, and a gap, either small or large, between the two. So then we start to get a sense that there is something behind the thoughts, something in the gap, between the thoughts. This is what we refer to as awareness, consciousness, pristine awareness. So our task just becomes to keep falling asleep during the day while we're awake and our eyes are open. Falling asleep by letting the mind go into the state which is similar to deep sleep. And after a while we begin to see that what we were looking at always was the ground, and we're calling, oh, these are the thoughts. We're always, I can't get out of my thoughts. We're always staring at the individual thoughts. We're missing the gap in between. And so we miss the field in which the thoughts are rising. And that field is awareness. But over time, we become very, very comfortable with the field of awareness itself by just dropping the thoughts and keep letting them go and don't identifying with them. Let go of anything that refers to I, me, or mine and thinking it's real. Then we begin to see the field. And then in time, the field and ground switch. And it happens just like that. Now we are recognizing ourselves as awareness and consciousness all the time. And we're able to see the thoughts, experiences, upsets, emotions, and experiences we're having as rising in the field of awareness. Now we're free of the objects in awareness itself. And we are resting eternally as the field. And this is what Ramana refers to when he's talking about when some of you have heard this metaphor. He says, you are the screen, you are not the movie. This is another description of what this experience of when field and ground flip, of what this is like. There's a continuous awareness that I am the awareness itself, and everything else is just moving. If you're in the theater and there's a forest fire raging on the screen, for that few minutes, you can be just so sucked into it, right? You can feel the fear in your body. You can feel your heart race. And then the end of the movie comes and you see it was just a blank screen. And you realize, whoa, that was a kind of a pleasant experience. I was afraid and I wanted to run and I was sweating, but it was all just not real. And this is the same experience you can have when field and ground flips. And you stop taking every single thought as real. And you begin to see that the secret to understanding who you are is to just keep letting go. Are you willing? Are you willing to just go through your life in a state of open-handedness? Or do you need to spend any more time in your life with your fist closed, clinging, holding on, clenching in your own life? Or can you open your heart and open your hand and rest? And be unafraid, even though you know that in the next moment something very difficult may come. Can you remain open-hearted in that? You can. Are you willing? So as many times as you seem to feel every day like you shut down or you close or you can't do it, just remind yourself very gently, be kind to yourself. Remind yourself, remind the mind, I can do this. And you remind yourself very gently until you convince yourself, and then it's done. The field and ground will flip, and you will be here, unafraid. And in some given moment, it still may not be pleasant. But the more you do this, and the more you're willing to remain as you are, as the ground of awareness, the more your own life will begin to gentle down, and the things that have troubled you over the course of a lifetime, because you just don't cling to them, you don't dwell on them, they stop rising. Because this is a big question that comes up a lot here in Satsang. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, don't cling, but this thing that I've been dealing with, it just keeps coming up over and over and over. It seems like I can't get rid of it ever, it can't go away. I let go of it, and the next day it's right back again. Or I go to sleep at night, and I'm doing fine, but as soon as I wake up, it's the very first thought I have. I just cannot let go of it. Well, yes, that may be what the experience is showing you at that moment. So your task until field and ground do this flip and you realize that you are awareness itself is just to keep saying, I can do this. I just have to let go. I just have to let go. And if you have to let go 100 times a day, 500 times a day, just do it. Don't struggle with it, resist it, have a commentary go on in your mind about whether or not you should do it. Just keep saying, let go, let go, let go. And eventually what happens, the state comes of awareness for you, field and ground flip, and now you have this recognition that the sages call gentleness or happiness, which is unalloyed. And what it means is that there's a pleasure in everything, even when the situation is difficult, because there's the recognition, I am not this, I am the awareness itself. And so this is why the sages say, yes, become very childlike in your openness. Right? You see children, they play, they scrape their knee, they cry, they get right up and they go back to playing. They just have this way of letting go quickly. Right? So you're not being encouraged to behave like a child. You're just being encouraged to have that mind of new in this moment. Yes? Because really, what you think you are and what you struggle with and what you've struggled with for many years is just in some ways an inability to be here now, ever renewing yourself in every moment, ever opening your heart, ever relaxing, ever loving, ever being compassionate towards yourself and others. Right? But if you just keep reminding yourself, let go, don't cling to this, don't cling to this, then eventually this comes, because it's your nature, it comes on its own. Understand, it's not something you need to do or you need to force. It's because it's your nature, it comes on its own. Because you are the screen and not the fire on the screen or the flood on the screen. Eventually the screen reveals itself, right? At the end of the movie, you don't do anything. You just sit in the chair comfortably in the theater with your heart pounding from the excitement of the movie. And then suddenly, the screen is there. And everything has disappeared. Because without that screen, whatever it was that was so exciting, fearful, unnerving, joyful on the screen, you couldn't see it. Right? The screen has to be there. This is awareness itself. This is why we keep pointing to it here. So that no matter what is going on in your world at this moment, you can know you are not that. You are the light of your own being. The screen on which the light is appearing is consciousness itself, and that is who you are. So don't remember any of this. Just remember, don't cling. Cling to nothing in your experience, in your mind, and all will be well. And do remember that as you settle more and more into this state of awareness, of pristine awareness, of awareness which isn't troubled by anything which shows up on the screen, the more you settle into this, the more you have the experience of pleasure. It's not the experience of dissolution, so that you suddenly become no one, and you suddenly become passive all the time. That's not what's happening. It's not what's being pointed at. You just learn to enjoy the little things and the big things, and even the things that are difficult. At some point, you can let go of and come back to this center of being which you are. And over time, this becomes your direct perception, and you know this. So what is there to push away then? You can allow everything to be as it is. Allow everyone to be as they are, even when it's difficult, because you will know you'll be returning. You will be yourself in a moment if you don't feel like it in this moment, if you're really attached to something or identified with something. You know that it won't last forever. And this becomes the source of pleasure for you. Not the objects themselves, not what you can acquire. You know that this foundation of love, understanding, and compassion lives in you. So what is there to fear, push away, struggle with, fight with? See, there's nothing. This is the true nothing. And it'll bring you joy. Yes? So a simple way to do this also is to take a breath. Take a deep breath. And as you exhale, just let go of whatever you're clinging to in the mind right at this moment. If there's nothing there, no problem. You won't even think to take a breath. But if there's something in your mind right now, right here, if your mind is chewing on something, either that you came here with or something because of something I just said, just take a deep breath and let go on the exhale. And you can notice when you do this that you're more fully here, that you're not so much here, you're not so much minded, you come here, come to the solar plexus when you breathe, and you exhale. You draw the mind out of itself, right? That which we're calling the mind, out of its thought patterns, out of its conditioning. You're drawing it down, excuse me, into the space of your own being. So this is another simple way. This is a way without words, right? This is not even saying, don't cling, using the mind. This is using the body and saying, don't cling. Because I know that sometimes when I speak for a while about things, some of you, the response that I hear from you is, this is getting a little bit minded for me, following these concepts. So the simplest way is just to breathe. Breathe in, breathe out consciously. Breathing in, gather up the difficulty that you're experiencing in the mind and body at this moment. Breathing out, let it go. So this is the conscious way to not cling and not use the mind. My mind just grabbed at something. I just realized I'm speaking awfully quiet today. Sorry, Anandi, you're going to have to adjust the volume. And Nandi is the person who edits the videos and then makes volumes adjustments when I forget that I'm supposed to be speaking up. See how mind is? Just pops up on screen, right? Just pops up on screen. It's like, oh yeah, right.
It seems for me that the thing that's the mind needs evidence to let go. Like it's not going to go without a fight. And so to not cling, it wants to know why or how or have an argument with that. Anyway, the inquiry about what is aware. Also looking to see how these objects are impermanent and fleeting.
Yes.
That helps. But I've come to a wall about the inquiry and it being tied to the body in a way that it's tied to the brain specifically. To ask the question, I don't know if this is coming out like I want it to, but what is aware, the answer to that still seems to be tied to a consciousness of the brain, a function of the brain. And
yes, it can seem that way, absolutely.
And I can't seem to get past that, so
This,
now I'm stuck in the body again, in fear.
Yes, so this is the time to realize that's a limitation of mind. And so now do what I was suggesting in terms of gathering up what's troubling you with an inhale and dropping it with an exhale. And the reason is the mind really has a difficult time concentrating on more than one thing at a time. It can concentrate on several things in series very quickly, right? Just a split second, it can go from right through 5 or 6 or 8 states of mind and thoughts. But as soon as we say, attention, come to the inhale, gather up these troubled thoughts and exhale them and let them go, we've done what I say often they do in India with a rogue elephant. When an elephant needs to be walked through the market, you can't walk an elephant through the market past all the fruits and veggies without the trunk going like this. So what the answer is to take a big heavy length of chain and offer it to the elephant. And of course the elephant will grab almost all elephants will grab anything that you put in front of their trunk, because that's their nature. So you put that big heavy chain, now the elephant can look and see the fruits and vegetables, but it's already got its trunk is already busy. So you can walk it through the market. Yeah? This is a similar kind of thing. So for this wild mind, which is like the trunk, which is just, if you give it something, it's just a small thing, right? Because these thoughts that you're having, where you say, yes, I try to do this, what is aware, and I just end up in fear, okay? The mind is not typically going to go further than that. Because what fear really is the inability to not cling at that moment, right? If there's an inability to not cling. The ability to cling is being masked by what you're calling fear. It's being hidden. So you're not going to find it that way. But you can very simply say, this is fear. Gather this up, let it go. Right? Now you've given the mind, which is chasing fear, gnawing on fear, and expanding fear, now you've given it something to do, like the chain in the elephant's trunk. Okay? So when you find yourself, because I can say to you, yeah, but can you see your first thought? This is my limitation. Here, when you started explaining to me, this is my limitation. If I were to say to you, can you see that's just a thought? That you have a limitation right in this moment? You might go yes, but actually the way you framed that comment shows that you have a strong belief in the limitation itself. So we're not going to attack that directly. We're going to come at it from the side. We're going to say, oh, okay, right. So the mind is really engaged right now. Let's just breathe in the mind and breathe it out. So this is a physical exercise. We employ the body. We can feel the rising of the belly, the rising of the chest as we inhale, and that creates a sense almost of suction. So we're going to vacuum up all those thoughts, and then as we exhale, we drop them. And this is a simple technique, and it's not going to convince that doubting part of the mind that says, how can this possibly work? Prove it to me. you can't convince the mind with the mind, right? Trying to convince the mind with the mind is like sending a thief out into the night to catch a thief, right? It isn't going to happen, right? So on some level, there is a modicum of trust in the teaching or the teacher that says, okay, I'm just going to breathe all this in, this difficulty, and I'm going to breathe it out, and I'm going to feel the rise of the body, the chest, the belly, and I'm going to feel the letting go, and I'm going to notice that at the end of that letting go, there's a gap, right? There's a moment of relaxation. This will relax the mind. You can't stop it. The mind might scream about it, say, I don't want to relax. I want to hold on to this issue that I'm chewing on here. But if you change your focus a little bit, just a little bit, from those thoughts, from the belief that they are real, to something else, I'm breathing them in. I don't care whether they're real or not. And that's not the conversation. I'm just breathing them in and I'm breathing them out. Fear is here, I'm breathing in fear, and I'm breathing it out. So we set up this kind of rhythm. And we do this as many times a day as we need to. Sometimes we only have enough time to do one breath. But one conscious breath is a moment which we're not supporting the story of me. We've stepped out of it in some way. Right? So even one conscious breath is a moment of meditation. So we do this throughout the day. And if we can connect 5 minutes worth of breath, 10 minutes worth of breath, 30 minutes worth of breath, and we can keep that fear kind of on the periphery during those moments, what will happen is the fear will diminish, and the gap at the end of the exhale, that moment of relaxation or peace or whatever you want to call it, momentary comfort, it will expand. So we don't put our effort into getting rid of things, like attacking a thought directly, right? That's not what we're doing. We're just saying, I'm not so interested in this fear, in this sense of fear. I'm not interested in it anymore. This has been ruling my life, but now I'm just going to breathe my way through it. Come away from the mind. So, as we've been having this conversation, has that caused that sense of fear to come down? Or is it still very strong in you? And breathe. As you explain this, don't immediately go here, right? I know you need to use the mind to have the next statement, but I want you to stay here. And in some way, keep your mind aware of your breath while you talk. Can you do that? So just breathe, okay? And look over here at me. Yeah, just breathe. Now, can you say what you were going to say?
I feel the
And breathe.
anxiety.
Okay, and breathe. Stay here, yeah, stay here. And breathe. Now, every time that you inhale, pick up that anxiety, what you're describing as anxiety, and as you exhale, set it down. Look, stay here with me. And so if you inhale again, pick up whatever little bit of anxiety is left, or a lot, now put it down in the exhale. Can you feel at the end the level of anxiety coming down even just a bit? If not, just pick up the next breath. I want you to try less hard. Right? And take the breath. And don't worry about what you're thinking about. Don't worry about this emotion. Just take a breath. Come on, take another breath. Don't hold on the exhale. There you go. Okay, now take another breath. And let go again. Let go completely. You see, you're staying with the emotion, but you're not blocking it and you're not grasping it. Just take another breath. And let go. There you go. See, when we have a strong emotion like this, what the mind is saying is, no, I can't let go of this. If I let go of this, I'm going to die. That's what we're feeling. That's the nature of fear. So it's very important, in whatever way we can, just to keep being here now. The mind, notice if you can, the mind takes you out of here now. Even you're looking right at me, I can see that you're looking past me. You're not here, you're looking past. The mind is looking for a way out. So, breathe and keep being here. See, it's right about now, you're a few breaths into this, breathing in and letting go. It's right about now that the mind is saying, yeah, but I want to talk about my story. Right? I want to reinforce the reality of what I'm thinking. I want to reinforce the reality of this emotion. Okay? We can reinforce the reality of what you're feeling without believing that's who you are. That we can know that you are infinite spirit standing in this emotional difficulty. So breathe. Come on, you stopped breathing again. Take a deep breath. Go out. Let go. So if you keep letting go like this, does the level of anxiety begin to come down? Yeah, even just a little. But you know that even that small amount of relaxation in the mind can increase very quickly because it's pleasurable for the body and the mind to feel that level of anxiety come down. So take the next inhale. So now, as we're doing this, can you notice that the story that was in the mind when you started this conversation with me has down-leveled? It's lost its importance to some degree. Keep breathing. Inhale. You stopped breathing. Go ahead. Can you notice now that it's not quite pressing against you so difficultly? So what's happening here is she was expressing that the mind didn't believe, it needed proof. So this kind of an exercise gives the mind the proof in some small way that if I do this as an alternative to grabbing at the story, clinging to it, clinging to the emotion, suffering over it, if I do this instead, there's a sense of relief, a sense of putting down. And then this becomes the thing which the mind begins to seek rather than an answer to the difficulty of the emotion, which is just passing. It will pass eventually. Well, this is a way for you, when you're not here, right, to begin, when you're in your own life, you're in your own moments, you're at home, you're there at night, not when you're obviously engaged at the computer or something like that, but when you can take a moment to do this kind of direct intervention into your own habit of clinging to your thoughts and emotions, then what begins to happen is the mind begins to get this sense of comfort. that you have the ability through this simple exercise to just down level things. Maybe they don't go away completely the first time, but if you keep with this, eventually you learn that you can let go spontaneously in every moment, anytime something begins to trouble you in this way, without even being concerned about what the story is or what the answer is. So in some ways, you have to drop the need to understand. You have to drop the need to want there to be a solution. You just have to know that this is the solution. And this doesn't engage the mind. So it undercuts that habitual pattern in the mind. Take a breath. This kind of conscious breathing is present in all of the traditions, right? Those of you that have been involved in Buddhist tradition, yoga, and so on, this kind of conscious breathing is present as a practice in all of those traditions. And this is the reason, because it's a very simple way, very effective way to remove the difficulty around the story that we're holding in the mind and the heart at that moment, and begin to say, you know, it hasn't worked. For 40 years I've been trying to hold on to this story and trying to get rid of it and trying to push it away and trying to understand it and trying to accept it and trying to forgive it and trying not to blame everybody around me because of it, and that hasn't worked. So now I'm going to go simple, because the complexity of all of that just keeps the story going. So now I'm going to go back to basics. The most basic thing prior to the question, who am I, what is aware, is the breath itself, right? Because we can be all tied up in knots and eventually we have to breathe. So that gives us an out. As soon as we consciously say, breathing in fear and letting go of fear, breathing in anxiety and letting go of anxiety. Another way that Robert Adams used a lot is he would say, simple meditation, breathe in, I. This brings us right to this bare attention of consciousness, right, of awareness itself. I am. And this am is the letting go. Because it lets go of everything which is not itself, you see. So if you need to use words, in other words, the mind still needs that tool, then you can say breathing in, the fear and letting go of the fear, or you can just say, I am. And if you do this for a half an hour, I promise you, you will change your consciousness at that moment. You will change what's in the mind without engaging the mind, you see? Because we can't get there through this mind. This mind that's experiencing the fear, that's experiencing the story, that's experiencing the clinging. We're just never going to get there through that gateway. And the breath is a direct body gateway, and when we use the mind in its simplest capacity, I am, or inhaling fear, exhaling fear, and we do this for moment after moment after moment, we bypass the whole mental habitual tendency or habit in the mind. You're still breathing. That was good. Yep. Saw that. So, what's the feeling now? Don't look to the mind, just look to the feeling. Good. So just keep this up. Don't take up any other practice. Just do this. Give yourself a couple of weeks, a month, to just change this pattern of seeing what's present in the mind and then going with that. Now, if you see something's present in the mind and you can feel the disturbance start, breathe in the disturbance, breathe in the thought, and then breathe it out and let go. Okay? So keep this physical exercise up. And eventually it will drop away on its own. You won't notice when it drops away. You'll just notice that you're feeling better. You're mellower. You're calmer in your life. Yeah. I want all of you to understand that the reason that we become so comfortable with these kinds of fears and we love to disappear into them and we love to become all tied up in them is because we actually fear what the people around us, the life that we have facing the world. It's like, in some ways it's easier to, I'm not saying this of you, I'm saying this out of my experience. It's easier to retreat into our fear than it is to stay here and now in whatever is present here. And so we develop these coping mechanisms when we can't cope. And for many of us, this comes from things in our past, right, from a childhood that was difficult or something like that. And we learn to protect ourselves by retreating through the fear or through the emotional upset into a deeper place inside ourselves. But now, as adults, that doesn't work for us. It's become counterproductive. Now we try to retreat into that deeper place to protect ourselves from what we're experiencing with another person or in our job or in the world or in our own minds. We try to go to that deeper place, but we can't. As a children are very good at that. You watch a child who really doesn't like what's going on with them, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to act out and fight against it, or they're just going to disappear. They're not going to be there in front of you. You can be there talking, and you're shaking your finger at them, and they're just gone. They just left. They're not listening anymore. They're just gone. So all of us have this innate ability to go deeper into ourselves. But as we develop the habit of attending to our fear over a lifetime, we lose the ability to see what's behind the fear, to go under the fear, to go around the fear. So this method of just coming to a breath and saying, inhaling what's difficult, what's here, what's problematic, and exhaling it out, brings us back to that childlike quality. And this is what the Buddha talked about after his awakening. He talked about his story of doing ascetic practices for 6 years and coming to the realization that all of this was not working. He was down to skin and bone, and he had been through many, many teachers, realized this wasn't working. So somehow inside him it rose, what should I do? And the answer came as a memory of him being a very young child, he was a prince, sitting in his father's pleasure garden. And this natural recognition of his own breath, in and out, came to him. And so he just took up that breath as an adult, sitting there under the Bodhi tree. He took up that breath, and then he had the recognition. He touched the earth and said, "This far and no further. This is all I'm going to do." And he sat there throughout that night, breathing in, breathing out. And during that time, demons came to him, memories came to him, difficulty came to him, dancing girls came to him. All of these things which were in the mind that he'd been trying to get rid of, they all came back, and he stayed with the inhale, breathing it in, exhale, breathing it out. And as the sun rose in the morning, he awakened to his nature, to Buddha mind, he called it, to what we're calling awakening or consciousness. Through this simple tool. So remember that. You say, the mind wants to know what it can do, how can it do, because it needs to be convinced. Well, remember, the Buddha did every kind of austerity possible for 6 years. Fasting, yoga, breathing, tortured his body and tortured his mind for 6 years, and then came to the recognition that this simple breath would take him where that he was exhausted. He couldn't go any further. He didn't know this breath was going to lead him to awakening. He simply said, "I'm exhausted," right? You might be familiar with that feeling, with that experience. I am just exhausted. I can't do this anymore. He was abandoning his spiritual practice. He said, "I'm not doing it anymore. I'm done. I've wasted 6 years." This was the thought in his head. So come to this breath, because this breath can take you where you need to go and where you want to go, where your inner knowing is trying to take you. So in the practice of Advaita and in the practice of Buddhism both of you, a lot of you know that I've practiced both for many years. Not simultaneously. I spent 18 years in Buddhism, and since I've spent about 15 years in Advaita. That these practices are just here to remind us that there's so much written in all the books about these practices and so on, but that what they come down to is be simple. The mind is complex. So if you want to bust through the confusion and the veiling of the mind, come to simplicity. A simple breath, a simple question. Who am I? What is aware? And keep that up. And eventually the complexity of the mind will fall down. Still breathing? Good. Look much better too. The suffering just fell away from you. Very good. Do notice that if you inhale, whatever it is, the fear and so forth, and you get to the top, and you stop like that, that's the mind grasping. So you don't have to do anything with the mind grasping. You just have to breathe out. And the mind will let go. It has to. It has to. Because when you bring the breath in and bring it to that level of tension and then lock it, right, it just holds the fear there. And it can stay for that long. So if you remind yourself, not even with your mind, but just letting go. And you know, I'm letting go, that's what I'm doing. I'm letting go of this fear, I'm letting go of this emotion, letting go of this thought. You don't have to say those words, you just know it inside your own being, that you are letting go. So train yourself not to cling in this way. And you will forget it, but when you remember it, be happy that you remembered it. Oh yeah, that's right, I had this tool. Because we both know the tendency of the mind is to go, oh, I forgot again, and start beating us up. So the mind takes the offensive. Our task is to remember, oh, I just remembered. Okay, good, great, I just remembered. I can do this. Okay. I have to take my hearing aid out. It's beeping at me saying, put in a new battery. So if you have something else, if anybody has a question or a comment, anyone else, please just come and do it. Can you pass that around, please?
Rishi, I appreciate the metaphor of the deep sleep. I was just sharing with Ravi Das before we came over how wonderful it was to get such a good night's sleep last night, and what a blessing it was. I said, I think at this age is probably the biggest blessing in my life is when I get a good night's sleep. And so he was wishing me many blessings of deep sleep. And what I didn't realize is that that could occur during the day as well. So that was very nice. Yeah.
You know what we're really talking about is the theta state, right? Which comes in meditation, right? Or comes in biofeedback. You know, they train you to come into the theta state. That's really what we're talking about, is training ourselves while we're awake to go into that theta state. Into that state where, is it the theta state, right? Where the mind is just kind of switched off, but awareness is here, and the mind can switch on at any moment. For most of us, what happens throughout a lifetime is the mind co-opts our ability to know that it can be shut off, because it doesn't want to be shut off. So it just stops that. We lose that ability over time. But we can cultivate that ability as well. And we've all had this experience. You see, this is not something that's unfamiliar to us, right? You can be really intensely engaged with someone at work, or having a really intense conversation, or a really beautiful conversation at lunch with someone, or having a cup of coffee or something at the coffee shop. But you've all noticed that as instant you walk out onto the street, right? Whatever was happening there, within a few moments or a few steps or a half a block, all of that just falls away, right? Because you're not in that moment anymore. Now you're in this moment. So we're just cultivating that natural tendency in the mind. We're not struggling, resisting, demanding that the mind do something that it's unfamiliar with. We're actually just noticing what it does to calm itself and supporting that. Whether we use the breath, or we sit in formal meditation, or we ask the question, who am I? What is aware? Am I aware? These questions that bring us from the objects back to the subject. Because, right, that's all the inquiry does in some way, right? I'm sort of making it black and white, and it's not quite that simple, but in a way it is. Our attention tends to be on the objects, whether the objects are sitting around the room with us, or sitting next to us, or they're in here, in the heart, they're in the emotions, they're in the mind. The mind has this capacity of attention, which we use if we're at the computer, or we're doing mathematics, or we're writing a novel, or we're creating a new dance, or we're preparing for yoga class, or whatever. Right? The mind has this ability, and this is a beautiful ability. The intellect is there for us to use. But over time it takes over. And then we come to believe that we have to have this intellect in motion at all times. We lose this natural connection to the moments in between, the thoughts in between, the emotions in between, the experiences. So we're just coming back to this all over and over and over. And when that field and ground flip happens, that's the moment in which we really begin to understand something about who we are. Before then, we're definitely getting relaxation, right? We're definitely down-leveling our anxiety using these things, but understand that at some point we recognize those were tools, those were moments, but that's not far enough, right? In some way, we want to know what's the nature of the screen itself. We don't want to just down-level our anxiety momentarily. We want to know, what is the nature of being? This is the question, who am I? Right? And then this is when the field and ground can flip. Now the objects are not so important, and our interest is really in the ground itself, in the field itself, and in the screen itself. We want to know what's the nature of that. And this is the recognition of Nisargadatta Maharaj, who said, I am that, when he realized that he was the ground of being. Right? He said, oh, I am that. That was his declaration. Of course, many people don't know this. He wrote that book. Do you know the book, what I'm talking about? I Am That? It was a famous book that was easily available. I don't know, it was published 30, 40 years ago. Do you know? I think I saw it on your bookshelf. Was it 40 years ago or something?
It's been around for a long time.
Long time. And then people took that to be, that's the gospel Siddhartha Maharaj, that's his gospel. And then they would go to him after 20 years after it was published, and he would say, forget that. It's beyond that. Because he saw his own revelation trapping people in their minds. And he just said, yeah, forget that. That was true then. This is now. And he would just push people past it. Because every revelation that you can have in the mind is not it. And eventually you have to abandon it. So you use the tool, whether it's your breath or it's the question or the inquiry, doesn't matter. You use it as long as you need it, right? But then you put it down, and you only pick it up because you have it, right? If you have the tool of the breath, or you have the tool of inquiry, of asking the question, am I aware, or who am I, or what is this? You have that tool forever. It doesn't go anywhere. So you don't have to repeat it over and over and over and over as a mental thought. Right? It's just there if you need it. If you become distracted, lost, caught in something, you're being overwhelmed by emotion, then you have the tool there. But the aim is the recognition of silence. This is the purpose of satsang and what we're doing here, is the recognition of silence. But we have to have these tools along the way because, as you've just demonstrated, if you cannot recognize silence when the mind can't calm down. So we have to have this tool, some tool. It doesn't have to be this tool, but in your case, I think this is a good one. So this worked for you, so this is good. For someone else, it will be a different tool that will work in the same way, but for a different mind or a different personality. Only to come to silence, to what is already here. And it's here throughout the day. Even this, we talk a lot sometimes in all the traditions about formal meditation and about how useful it is and how important it is. Of course, most of you have had that experience about how important and how grounding formal meditation can be, where you take it up at a particular time or you do it every day and you make a commitment, or almost every day you make a commitment to doing that. So beautiful. But that's not the aim. The aim is to come to this place where the silence, which you begin slowly to experience as you sit in formal meditation during each morning or each evening, that this just becomes, there's a recognition, this is just your nature. You are not meditating, you are meditation. This is your nature. And you cannot be anything else. The mind will try very hard for you to be something else other than silence. But for those of us sitting here now, there isn't any other option. You've already been called. You're being pulled into your own silence by being here. You're not even doing this. I know you think you are, but it's not true. Silence is calling you. And something in you is wise enough to respond. Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam urvakamiva bandhanam richormukchiyamamritava swaha bhuva bhu om sat Jung Hung Om. Om Shanti.